The Cuban Missile by Joseph and Jennifer. Who was involved in this event? During the Cuban Missile Crisis, leaders of the U.S. and the Soviet Union engaged in an intense 13-day political and military standoff in 1962 over the installation of nuclear-armed Soviet missiles on Cuba just 90 miles from the U.S. shores. Where did this event take place? Spiced with open secrets, communication, and strategic miscommunication between the two sides, the Cuban Missile Crisis was unique in fact that it took place mainly in the White House and the Soviet Kremlin. When did this take place? It took place October 14, 1962. The Cuban Missile Crisis, also known as the October Crisis of 1962, the Caribbean Crisis, or the Missile Scare, was a 1-month and 4-day occurrence, ended on November 20th, 1962. Describe what occurred. It was a direct and dangerous confrontation between the United States and the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and was the moment when the two superpowers came close to nuclear conflict. Why did this happen? What was the outcome? The Cuban Missile Crisis took place because of the hunger for power by two great nations in the world. The result of the Cuban Missile Crisis was an increasing buildup of nuclear weapons that continued until the end of the Cold War. So now watch this amazing video.
In 1959, Fidel Castro took control of the island nation of Cuba, only 90 miles from the state of Florida. He established Cuba as a communist nation and began forging a close relationship with the Soviet Union, which concerned the United States. In April of 1961, the United States made an attempt to remove Castro from power. The U.S. trained Cuban exiles who had escaped Castro by moving to Florida and supported them in an invasion of Cuba. This became known as the Bay of Pigs invasion. The invasion failed, and Castro continued to tighten his grip over Cuba. In August of 1962, the Cubans and Soviets began secretly establishing sites to launch nuclear missiles from Cuba. With the use of these missile bases, the Soviet Union could have first strike capability against the United States. On October 15th, the United States discovered the existence of these missiles. President John F. Kennedy and his advisors considered several different strategies, ranging from diplomacy to a blockade, or even a full-scale invasion of Cuba. President Kennedy eventually chose a blockade. The U.S. Navy placed ships in the Caribbean Sea surrounding Cuba and would not allow any Soviet ships to reach Cuba. On October 22nd, Kennedy announced the threat to the nation, causing panic and turmoil across the country. Throughout the next several days, the crisis continued to escalate as both sides refused to back down. The United States insisted that the missile bases be removed, while the Soviet Union and Cuba refused to admit that the bases even existed. As the days continued, the Soviet Union remained diligent, and the Kennedy administration began preparing the early stages of an invasion plan. On October 25th, the blockade was challenged for the first time. Soviet ships approached the quarantine zone, but American ships held their ground. The Soviet vessels were forced to turn back, and the blockade continued. On that same day, the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Adlai Stevenson, confronted the Soviets in the UN Assembly, revealing photographic evidence that forced the Soviet Union to admit the missile bases existed. The crisis finally ended on October 28, 1962, when President Kennedy and Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev reached a secret agreement. The Soviets would remove their missile bases in Cuba, and in exchange, the United States would remove missile bases in Turkey, which were close to the Soviet Union's borders. To this day, the Cuban Missile Crisis is regarded as the closest that the United States has ever come to nuclear war.